On this special episode, we take an in-depth look at the power of youth movements to affect change through our coverage of the Other Box Project Symposium. Lawrenceville's 10-minute newscast begins right now.
From the studios inside the Lawrenceville School's historic Pop Hall, this is L10 with Aidan Duffy.
Hello and welcome to this week's show. The vice presidential forums and elections took place on Thursday. Congratulations to Edward Miller, Vice President of Academics, Tosh Ray, Vice President of Honor and Discipline, and Makayla Miller, Vice President of Social Life. Lawrenceville's Gay Straight Alliance celebrated Pride Week with programming, including Pride Bingo, Wear Your Colors Day, and a panel discussion. The week culminated in a day of silence where participants refrained from speaking to symbolize the silence of the LGBTQIA community. Jami E. Tucker, Lawrenceville class of 1973, was the first African American to receive the prestigious Francis Gassner Award on April 14th. Tucker, founding principal of Self and Tucker Architects in Memphis, was given the award for his contributions to the architecture profession and the community. On Thursday, former astronaut and professor of mechanical engineering at Columbia University, Michael Massimino, addressed the Lawrenceville community. Massimino, also senior advisor for space programs at the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum, was the first person to tweet from space. In addition, he played himself on the CBS comedy The Big Bang Theory and frequently appears in news shows, late-night talk shows, and podcasts. Congratulations to Marcia Ojo, Margot Terrison, Jesse Brewer, and Carolyn King, who shattered the school record by 14 seconds in the girls' 4x800 meter relay at the Penn Relays on Thursday. Running an overall time of 9:38, these Laurentians blazed into Lawrenceville history at Franklin Field. On Wednesday, April 25th, Lawrenceville welcomed scholars, civil rights activists, journalists, student leaders, and Lawrenceville alumni to campus for a symposium on the power of youth movements from Little Rock to Lawrenceville and beyond. We've devoted this week's show to coverage of this symposium, which is a collaboration with WNYC Radio's The Other Box Project on love, race, and identity. The project was conceived, created, and curated by legal scholar and journalist Jami Floyd.
I was born before the United States Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education. So I was born and conscious and aware of a world in which white supremacy dominated, and we were not regarded as equal. I was raised in a community where the people we looked up to, including my father and others, were what we called race people, who were committed to the cause of social justice, to civil rights, and ultimately to human rights. So I suppose it's either in your DNA or not, but I think it also is a question of how you find satisfaction in life, whether accumulation of things is what drives you, or whether being connected to some larger cause, some larger meaning is what you need.
Students have been at the center of activism, the Little Rock Nine, the Montgomery boycott, and now we're talking about the March for Our Lives. So today we're going to talk with some students. And so Chisom and I invited these 4 students to help us consider the power of youth at this time in our country. What we're going to do, Chisom and I are going to ask them a few questions just to get the conversation going, and then we want you to ask them about how we create change at this time in our country.
One of the speakers that really impacted me today was Alex Domb, and he talked about writing for his school, Washington Square News.
Personally, my own values often align with those of the activists, especially regarding climate and transparency. But my goal is to present the truth to whoever I'm writing for in the most accurate possible way, and sometimes the way that I write the truth isn't going to be spun in the way that the activists might have written it themselves, which is kind of been difficult. So in some senses, I believe that I'm a member of their community, and in other cases, I feel like I can't help them in a way. It's not my job to help them in a way that they might want of me.
My role as an activist is an activist for the truth. I think that's what all journalists should be, honestly. So it's a different form of activism, obviously, than going for some policy goal or going for some social change. But being an activist for truth can actually aid those who are going for like some other form of change. So like presenting the truth in a particular way could obviously shed light on issues that activists want. One of the best things about journalism, obviously, is that it can give people a platform. And so that's something that I try to do with activists, with other people in the community, especially those who don't have as much power as others, is to give them a voice. And by giving them a voice, you can allow other people to read them, other people to hear them, it broadcasts them, and it allows more people, hopefully, to sympathize with them.
And so he was writing about some of the riots, and so that really sparked my interest in student activism, and I can see myself being an activist on campus.
I went to broadcast journalism just to follow the path of some of the people that I looked up to in sports. But then I learned what journalism really was and the tool that it is. And it's not, I realized I was using my degree for the wrong thing. What inspires me to do the work that I do is just, helping people. Yeah, quite simply. I feel that it's my job to take difficult subjects and stories, take that and bring it to a broader audience and let my voice be heard, because it's not often that, voices like mine are heard. I think with young people, it's a matter of interest, and we live in a day and age where social media is a really big thing, and that's where a lot of young people are getting their news. In that regard, I feel that young people can make a change, and they could use the platforms more effectively than even my generation could. Students can, they could be a citizen, they could use it for citizen journalism and, put out stories themselves. Most people underestimate their ability to make a difference, even when it comes to things like voting. People will say, oh, my vote doesn't matter. When you can get a bunch of people together, like-minded, to come together for a cause, good things can always happen.
I think the hardest thing is being able to speak up to people who you've looked up to throughout your life. Recently I had an experience where a family member said something very offensive and very transphobic, and though I'm not trans, as an activist, intersectionality is critical. So I spoke up, and it ensued in a huge family feud, but I think part of being an activist is not taking a time off. You can't just be an activist when you're out of the streets or when you're in your classroom. You have to address the problems you see in your inner circle, and even if it's people that you have looked up to or even that you're related to.
I think one thing that's really hard is kind of being flexible and adaptable. So even with starting the podcast, in my mind I had an idea of what I wanted to do, what our mission should be, but as time progressed and through working through a democratic process with other people that might have other ideas or other goals, that's something that kind of comes with its own constraints. So we kind of went from being a predominantly Black-focused podcast to opening up to more intersectional issues.
Yeah, I think having 10 eyes on campus is much better than having 2 eyes on campus. It's kind of able to allow us to see more of campus and see more of the issues going on, because we're not wanting to necessarily preach to the choir. We want to have a medium that people can use to disagree and to engage with each other.
The most important times that you can really affect change is like over dinner, is like when you're talking with your friends. Because when people are vulnerable in that way, they're really sharing what they're really thinking. And it was that moment in like having that feud with like a family member and realizing like, okay, no, I believe in these issues all the time. I'm not just believing in these issues when I'm in class or when I'm at a protest. So I think that motivated me even further. I mean, it was tough to, but also empowering to stand up to someone who may be like 50 years older than me, but not seeing how, like, as a Black person, you can't just be an activist as a Black person if you're only standing for Black issues. You have to, you have to be intersectional. You have to stand for LGBTQ rights. You have to stand for women's rights. the only way we can get free is if everyone is free. So I think I just, that only pushed me further to seeing, you know, if this person doesn't get it, then I have an even bigger job to do to make sure others get it.
You have to create structured time for you to engage in practices of self-care. If you don't make that time, the time's just not going to come to you. If you are always engaging with issues that you care very much about, but you're never allowing yourself to take a back seat or even to back away from the things that are so politically pressing, then it's just inevitable that you're going to feel tired or fatigued when it comes to discussing these issues. And I think if you want to be the best activist that you can be, then you have to learn how to cut it off sometimes. There's a quote that I saw somewhere where it was like, sometimes you have to sleep, you can't always be woke. Make time to sleep would be my answer.
I think there are several essential ingredients for young people. The first is to ignore old people like me who try to give you advice. The second is to really study history. I was at Columbia 48 hours ago talking to black students who said they hadn't really been aware that black students had played a critical role in the protests that took place at Columbia, that they had focused on Mark Rudd and SDS and hadn't known. So it's necessary to study the past. It's also necessary to get in touch with the core question of what matters to you in your life. What is it that you're committed to, and does that involve justice? And as we live on a planet that seems in many ways to be spinning out of control with our destructive capacity and with growing inequality both within the United States and worldwide, there are critical questions that have to be addressed.
A really important thing I would say for kids to do is try to consume news from multiple sources. Don't stick to one thing. It's called the filter bubble. You know, you're so used to getting, you know, your news from here. So you're getting one kind of content, you know. Expand, you know, broaden your horizons and the type of things that you consume so that you can get a more well-rounded scope of what's going on.
I happen to have a 5-year-old grandson about whom I'm absolutely crazy. And it seems to me that the core questions that will address him and that confront students today is, what will justice look like in this world, and what can individual students do during the course of a lifetime to make justice actually a verb and not a noun.
That is our broadcast for this last week in April 2018. From all of us here at L10, thank you so much for watching, and good night.